Now, the problem here is if you've got that 392 outstanding, the asset can be called up. So a smart thing to do is to put one of these clauses called a Hawkins Clause into the deed of debt between you and the trust. And what this clause says is, in the event that you want to call for repayment of the loan, okay, in the event you want your money back, you want to call for repayment of the loan, that the trustees agree under the acknowledgement of debt that only you, the natural person, can call for repayment of the money. Does that make sense? Okay, so a Hawkins Clause, what it says is, only the natural person who lent the money may call for the loan. And it came from a case called Hawkins and the ANZ, and effectively Mrs. Hawkins had signed some guarantees with her husband under the guarantee arrangement. It was Alan Hawkins, of course, in the 80s. He was bankrupted. Under the guarantee, she had signed the guarantee too, and so they said, look, we've bankrupted your husband. He hasn't paid all his debts to us. We now want you to pay them. And she said, well, I'd like to pay them, but I don't have any assets. And they said, what happened to that house you had? And she said, well, I transferred that to a trust. And ANZ said, well, then there must be an acknowledgement of debt to the trust. And she said, there is, but there's a clause that says only I can call the loan and I won't. And they said, oh, well, that's easy. We'll bankrupt you, and the official assignee, as your surrogate, will call the loan. And she said, you can't do that. Or her lawyers said this. And they said, well, we'll go to the court and get a declaratory judgment. So they went up to the High Court, and the High Court said, no, we agree with Mrs. Hawkins, you can't call that loan. So that's good law, that's High Court law. And the reason why I say that is lots of solicitors will say, I have heard lots of solicitors say, oh, this could be overturned. Because it is a bit fishy, isn't it? I mean, as a promoter of putting it into your deed of debt, I would say that's a bit fishy. But it's High Court law. And I've had solicitors write legal opinions to clients saying, you know, any transaction entered into to defeat creditors' interests is voidable under insolvency law, and the courts will be quick to peel the stuff back and give the assets back to the creditors, and that's all true. But if you look at the process of doing that, you'd have to go to Court of Appeal to overcome a High Court case. And there's significant cost and significant time delay. Often with law, you'll see solicitors say things that are very negative. They'll say, oh, you know, this could be taken to Court of Appeal and they could challenge it on these grounds, and therefore you shouldn't do it. I mean, I find that extraordinary advice. The advice I would prefer to see would be this could get taken to Court of Appeal, it could be challenged, it could be significant cost, significant delay. So do it, but do it with the understanding that it might be challenged, it might turn over. Make sense? And if it does turn over, you'd have a call notice. And what the call notice says is, in the event that you want your money back out of the trust, you agree to give a minimum notice on calling up the loan of 8 years. Okay? Simple mechanism. And what that's going to do is if you become a bankrupt and they spend 2 years getting to the Court of Appeal and they strike out the Hawkins case, then they'll still have 6 years to wait, the creditors. And so at this point in time, when the insolvency specialist runs through this and says, oh, look, we're waiting 8 years minimum, but we could probably get this Hawkins clause bold, that might be what they say. They'll also say, but this is really a hard road. These creditors are difficult. These debtors are difficult to deal with. Why don't we try and settle with them? And then the trustees of the trust might say, well, why don't we give you $100,000 against the $400,000 liability and we'll call it quits. And that's the sort of thing you can do with structures in place. Okay, you haven't got a chance unless you've got your structures in place.